In the late 1st century BCE, the Roman Republic, once a beacon of power, discipline, and governance, was crumbling under the weight of internal strife, civil wars, and political chaos. What had once been a balanced system of shared power between the Senate and the Roman people was now fractured, torn apart by ambitious generals, political factions, and the struggle for dominance over Rome's vast territories. The city of Rome itself, once the heart of the Republic, stood at a crossroads, uncertain of its future. The seeds of this decline were sown over decades of corruption, expansion, and conflict. Rome had grown from a modest city-state into a sprawling empire, stretching its influence across the Mediterranean, but with this expansion came challenges. Wealth poured into the city, creating a deep divide between the rich and the poor, while generals returning from military conquests held the loyalty of their troops above that of the Senate. This imbalance of power led to a series of civil wars that shook the foundations of Roman society. At the center of this turmoil was Julius Caesar, a brilliant military leader and populist who seized control of the Republic by declaring himself dictator for life. Caesar's rise, while celebrated by many, sparked outrage among Rome's traditionalists, who feared the end of the Republic and the emergence of a new monarchy. In 44 BCE, a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, assassinated Caesar on the Ides of March, believing that his death would restore the Republic. But instead of returning Rome to peace and stability, Caesar's assassination threw the Republic into further chaos. The power vacuum left by Caesar's death created a struggle for supremacy, as various factions vied for control of the city and its territories. At the heart of this struggle was a young man named Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, who would soon emerge as one of history's most influential figures. Octavian was only 18 years old when Caesar was assassinated, yet he possessed a sharp political mind and a relentless drive to fulfill his great-uncle's legacy. Though young and inexperienced, he quickly secured the support of Caesar's loyal soldiers and began maneuvering through Rome's treacherous political landscape. His ambition was clear: to rise above the chaos and restore order to the Republic, though in doing so he would reshape Rome forever. In the years that followed, Octavian would face fierce rivals, including Mark Antony and Lepidus, powerful figures who had aligned themselves with Caesar, but now sought power for themselves. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate, an uneasy alliance aimed at defeating the forces that had killed Caesar. This alliance, however, would prove short-lived, as personal ambition and political rivalry would lead to further conflict. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic transformations in history: the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. Octavian's journey from a young, ambitious heir to Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, would forever alter the course of Western civilization. His reign would usher in the Pax Romana, a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity, and solidify Rome's position as the dominant power of the ancient world. But before he could claim his place as Rome's first emperor, Octavian would need to navigate treacherous waters, both politically and militarily. The Republic's old structures were collapsing, and the future of Rome hung in the balance. The story of Augustus is not just one of power and conquest, but of cunning, resilience, and the creation of a new era, one that would shape the world for centuries to come. Chapter 1. The Young Octavian. In the year 63 BCE, in the heart of the Roman Republic, a child was born who would one day reshape the world. His name was Gaius Octavius, though history would come to know him as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. His beginnings, however, were far from extraordinary. Born into a wealthy but not particularly powerful family, Octavian's early life was marked by privilege, but not by the expectation of greatness. Octavian was born in Velitrae, a small town southeast of Rome. His father, also named Gaius Octavius, was a respected but relatively minor figure in Roman politics. His mother, Attia, was the niece of Julius Caesar, and it was this familial connection that would prove crucial in shaping Octavian's destiny. From an early age, Octavian was exposed to the world of Roman politics, watching as his great-uncle, Julius Caesar, rose to become one of the most powerful men in Rome. Despite his youth, Octavian was noted for his intelligence, his calm demeanor, and his ability to navigate the complexities of Roman society with skill and precision. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy, not one to seek attention, but those who knew him recognized a sharp mind behind his reserved exterior. He was educated in the arts of rhetoric, philosophy, and military strategy, preparing him for a life in the public sphere. Yet, at this point, no one could have imagined the heights he would one day reach. As a teenager, Octavian was sent to Apollonia, in what is now Albania, to complete his military training. It was here, while learning the art of warfare alongside Caesar's legions, that Octavian received the news that would change his life forever. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar, the man who had become the de facto ruler of Rome, was assassinated by a group of senators who believed they were saving the Republic from tyranny. The city of Rome was thrown into chaos, and the future of Caesar's legacy was suddenly uncertain. But Caesar had made provisions for his death. In his will, he named his grandnephew Octavian as his adopted son and heir. At just 18 years old, Octavian found himself thrust into the center of Roman politics, with the weight of Caesar's legacy now resting on his young shoulders. It was a moment that would have overwhelmed many, but not Octavian. His calm, calculating nature allowed him to step into the role with surprising ease. Upon learning of his adoption, Octavian returned to Rome, where he began the delicate task of securing his position in the turbulent political landscape. Caesar's assassination had left a power vacuum in Rome, and many believed that Mark Antony, one of Caesar's closest allies, would take control. Antony, a skilled general and politician, had expected to inherit Caesar's mantle, and he was not pleased to see this young, untested man appear as Caesar's chosen heir. The rivalry between Octavian and Antony would define much of the next decade, but for now, Octavian was focused on establishing himself as a legitimate figure in Roman politics. He knew that, despite Caesar's will, he would need more than just a name to secure his position. He would need allies, resources, and, most importantly, the loyalty of the soldiers who had served under Caesar. Octavian's first step was to claim his inheritance, which included not only Caesar's wealth, but also the loyalty of Caesar's legions. With the backing of these soldiers, Octavian began to build his own power base. He moved carefully, using diplomacy and strategic alliances to strengthen his position, all the while presenting himself as the rightful heir to Caesar's legacy. One of his earliest victories was winning the support of Cicero, the renowned orator and statesman. Cicero, who was no fan of Antony, saw in Octavian a potential ally against the rising power of Antony. Together, they worked to position Octavian as a defender of the Republic, despite his close association with Caesar, who had been seen by many as a threat to the Republic's survival. Octavian's calm, measured approach to politics belied his ambition. He understood that power in Rome was a delicate balance of alliances, military strength, and public support. While he lacked Antony's experience in battle, he made up for it with his sharp political instincts. He knew when to push forward and when to retreat, always thinking several steps ahead of his rivals. In 43 BCE, Octavian's position was solidified when he, Antony, and Lepidus, another of Caesar's former allies, formed the Second Triumvirate, a powerful political alliance that gave them control over Rome and its territories. This triumvirate was created to defeat the forces of Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy that had killed Caesar. Together, the triumvirs launched a campaign against Caesar's assassins, culminating in the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, where Brutus and Cassius were defeated. Though the triumvirate was initially successful, it was an uneasy alliance filled with underlying tension and mutual distrust. Octavian and Antony, in particular, were destined for conflict. But for the moment, they were united in their goal of avenging Caesar's death and securing their control over Rome. Despite his youth, Octavian had proven himself to be a force to be reckoned with. His rise from an inexperienced teenager to one of the most powerful men in Rome had been swift, but it was far from over. Octavian's ambition knew no bounds, and as he consolidated power, it became clear that he had no intention of sharing Rome with anyone, not even Antony. The young Octavian, once an unknown figure in the shadow of Caesar, was now poised to reshape the future of Rome. But the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, betrayals, and wars. As Octavian looked toward the future, he knew that his destiny was not just to follow in Caesar's footsteps, but to surpass him, to become not just a ruler of Rome, but its first emperor. Chapter 2. The Clash with Mark Antony. As the Second Triumvirate solidified its control over Rome following the defeat of Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, a fragile peace fell over the Roman world. But beneath this surface of unity, the triumvirs, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus, were bound together more by necessity than by genuine trust or shared vision. Of the three, the rivalry between Octavian and Mark Antony was the most profound, setting the stage for a dramatic struggle that would determine the future of Rome. Mark Antony was no stranger to power. A seasoned general and loyal ally of Julius Caesar, Antony had fought alongside Caesar in many battles and had been instrumental in maintaining order after Caesar's assassination. Tall, charismatic, and commanding, Antony was a man of action who thrived on the battlefield and relished in the spoils of victory. He was, by all accounts, a warrior, a man forged in the fires of military conquest. By contrast, Octavian was younger, more calculating, and more cautious. Where Antony saw strength in arms, Octavian saw strength in strategy. While Antony moved boldly, Octavian moved carefully, always looking to outmaneuver his rivals through shrewd political alliances and cold calculations. In their personalities, they could not have been more different, yet for a time they maintained an uneasy alliance, both understanding that, for now, they needed each other. After the victory at Philippi, the Roman world was divided among the three triumvirs. Antony was given control over the eastern provinces, a rich and vast region that included Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor. Lepidus took control of Africa, while Octavian returned to Italy, overseeing the heart of the Roman Republic. It was an agreement that temporarily satisfied all parties, but cracks in the alliance soon began to emerge. Antony, who had always been drawn to the east, saw an opportunity to expand his influence and wealth. His attention quickly turned to Egypt and its queen, the legendary Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was a powerful ruler in her own right, intelligent, ambitious, and fiercely independent. She had once been the lover of Julius Caesar and had borne him a son, Caesarion. Now she saw in Antony another powerful ally who could protect Egypt and secure her throne. When Antony and Cleopatra met, their connection was immediate and intense. Antony, captivated by Cleopatra's beauty, charm, and intelligence, quickly fell under her spell. The two became lovers, and Antony soon began spending more and more time in Egypt, neglecting his duties in Rome. This relationship would prove to be a turning point in Antony's life, one that would have far-reaching consequences for both him and Rome. While Antony was immersed in his life with Cleopatra, Octavian remained in Rome, carefully consolidating his power. He had inherited the loyalty of Julius Caesar's veterans and used his position to strengthen his control over Italy and the western provinces. But Octavian's ambitions went far beyond simply ruling part of the Roman world. He wanted it all, and he knew that the key to his ultimate success lay in weakening Antony's influence. To do this, Octavian embarked on a campaign of political propaganda, carefully crafting a narrative that would turn the Roman people against Antony. He portrayed Antony as a man who had abandoned his Roman values, seduced by the allure of an Egyptian queen and corrupted by foreign luxury. Antony, in Octavian's telling, had become more Egyptian than Roman, and this betrayal of Roman ideals could not be tolerated. The propaganda was devastatingly effective. Octavian circulated coins, pamphlets, and speeches that depicted Antony as a traitor to Rome, a man who had forsaken his homeland for the temptations of the East. He highlighted Antony's children with Cleopatra, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, and emphasized that Antony had named these children rulers of Roman territories, suggesting that he intended to pass control of Rome to his half-Egyptian offspring. Octavian also took aim at Cleopatra, portraying her as a manipulative foreign queen who sought to control Rome through Antony. Cleopatra, in Octavian's propaganda, was the embodiment of the Eastern threat, a seductive temptress who threatened the very foundations of Roman virtue. The Roman people, already suspicious of foreign influences, were easily swayed by these accusations, and Antony's popularity in Rome began to wane. At the same time, Octavian was building his military strength. While Antony lingered in Egypt, Octavian was organizing and training his legions, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. He skillfully navigated the political landscape, ensuring that the Senate remained on his side while quietly undermining Antony's authority in the western provinces. He also secured alliances with powerful figures in Rome, including Agrippa, a brilliant military commander who would play a crucial role in the battles to come. The final break between Octavian and Antony came in 32 BCE. That year, Octavian made a bold move. He seized Antony's will from the Temple of the Vestal Virgins and made its contents public. The will revealed Antony's desire to be buried in Egypt alongside Cleopatra, not in Rome, and that he had left large portions of Roman territory to his children with Cleopatra. This revelation outraged the Roman people and the Senate, who saw Antony's actions as a betrayal of Rome itself. With this final act, Octavian had secured the moral high ground. He convinced the Senate to declare war, not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign queen who sought to undermine its sovereignty. By casting the war in these terms, Octavian cleverly positioned himself as the protector of Rome, while Antony was seen as a traitor who had allied himself with a dangerous foreign power. In 31 BCE, the conflict between Octavian and Antony reached its climax at Actium, a decisive naval engagement off the coast of Greece. Octavian's forces, commanded by Agrippa, faced Antony and Cleopatra's fleet in a battle that would determine the Roman world. Antony's forces were no match for the skill and strategy of Agrippa, and as the battle turned against him, Antony and Cleopatra fled back to Egypt in disarray. The victory at Actium marked the end of the Civil War and the beginning of Octavian's undisputed control over Rome. Antony and Cleopatra, realizing that their defeat was inevitable, both committed suicide in Alexandria, leaving Octavian as the sole ruler of the Roman world. Octavian's triumph over Antony was not just a military victory. It was a triumph of political strategy, propaganda, and careful calculation. He had outmaneuvered his greatest rival, using Antony's own weaknesses against him, and in doing so, he had secured his place as the most powerful man in Rome. With Antony and Cleopatra gone, Octavian returned to Rome in triumph. He had accomplished what no one else had been able to do. He had ended the cycle of civil wars that had plagued the Republic for decades. But more than that, he had set the stage for a new era in Roman history, an era in which he would become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Chapter 3. The Battle of Actium. The year was 31 BCE, and all eyes in the Roman world were fixed on the waters of the Ionian Sea off the coast of Greece. What had begun as a simmering rivalry between two of Rome's most powerful figures, Octavian and Mark Antony, was about to culminate in a decisive clash that would determine the fate of the Roman world. The stakes could not have been higher. The future of Rome itself hung in the balance. Would the empire be led by Antony, who had become increasingly entangled with the foreign queen Cleopatra, or by Octavian, the calculating and ambitious heir of Julius Caesar, who had positioned himself as the defender of Roman tradition? The battlefield for this momentous confrontation was the open sea, just off the promontory of Actium on the western coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra's forces had gathered here, preparing to confront the fleet and armies of Octavian. Antony's forces were formidable, consisting of hundreds of warships and a vast array of soldiers drawn from across the eastern provinces and Egypt. Cleopatra herself was present, commanding a fleet of Egyptian ships that represented the wealth and power of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Together, Antony and Cleopatra were confident that their combined strength would overpower Octavian's forces. But Octavian had been meticulously preparing for this moment. His fleet was commanded by one of Rome's greatest naval strategists, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a loyal and brilliant general who had already proven his military genius in previous campaigns. Agrippa had been harassing Antony's supply lines for months, cutting off crucial reinforcements and forcing Antony into a position of desperation. With fewer supplies and growing dissent among his ranks, Antony was forced into a corner. He had to engage Octavian's forces or risk seeing his army disintegrate from within. On the morning of September 2nd, 31st BCE, the battle began. The waters of the Ionian Sea were calm, but tension rippled through the air as the two vast fleets maneuvered into position. Antony's fleet, composed of large, heavily armed ships, lined up in a formidable formation. These warships were imposing, fitted with battering rams and manned by seasoned soldiers. Cleopatra's Egyptian fleet stood ready behind Antony's, a silent but powerful reminder of the wealth and influence she wielded. Octavian's fleet, however, was smaller and more agile. Agrippa had chosen lighter, faster ships that could outmaneuver Antony's cumbersome vessels. While Antony relied on brute force, Octavian's strategy emphasized mobility and precision. Agrippa had carefully studied Antony's weaknesses and knew that speed and coordination would be the key to victory. As the battle commenced, the sea echoed with the sounds of war. The massive ships of Antony's fleet surged forward, their oars slicing through the water as they charged toward Octavian's forces. The first clash was brutal. Antony's ships crashed into Octavian's with their battering rams, shaking the decks and sending splinters flying. The men aboard fought fiercely, engaging in hand-to-hand combat as they leaped from ship to ship, swords and spears clashing in the bright sunlight. But despite Antony's initial advantage in size and strength, Agrippa's strategy began to turn the tide. Octavian's lighter ships, faster and more maneuverable, darted around Antony's vessels, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before Antony's lumbering ships could respond. Agrippa's forces used fire as a weapon, launching flaming projectiles at Antony's ships, setting several of them ablaze. Thick smoke began to rise from the water as burning ships drifted aimlessly, their crews leaping into the sea to escape the flames. As the battle raged on, Antony's forces grew increasingly disorganized. His fleet, designed for brute strength, struggled to keep up with Agrippa's swift and calculated attacks. The heavy warships, once thought to be invincible, were proving to be a liability in the face of Octavian's superior tactics. Cleopatra's fleet, positioned behind Antony's, remained largely inactive, awaiting the outcome of the main engagement. Then, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Cleopatra, seeing the battle turn against Antony, made a fateful decision. Without warning, her Egyptian fleet turned and began sailing away from the battle, heading for the open sea. Cleopatra, ever calculating, had decided to retreat, abandoning Antony to his fate. Whether this was a premeditated plan or a spur-of-the-moment decision remains unclear, but it was a turning point in the battle. When Antony saw Cleopatra's fleet retreating, he was torn. His duty was to continue fighting, to lead his men to victory, but his heart pulled him in another direction. Antony had become deeply entwined with Cleopatra, both personally and politically, and the sight of her ships leaving the battle shook him to his core. In a moment of desperation, Antony abandoned his own fleet and sailed after Cleopatra, leaving his forces leaderless and confused. With Antony gone, the morale of his troops collapsed. Many of his ships, seeing their commander flee, surrendered to Octavian's forces. Others were destroyed by Agrippa's relentless attacks. The once mighty fleet of Antony and Cleopatra was in ruins, their soldiers either dead, captured, or scattered. The Battle of Actium was over, and the victory belonged decisively to Octavian. The aftermath of the battle was just as significant as the battle itself. Octavian's victory at Actium marked the end of the civil war and the beginning of his uncontested control over Rome. Antony and Cleopatra, now fugitives, fled to Egypt, where they would meet their tragic end less than a year later. Antony, humiliated by his defeat and abandonment, committed suicide. Cleopatra, knowing that her capture would lead to her being paraded as a prisoner in Rome, followed suit, famously ending her life by the bite of an asp, a poisonous snake. With their deaths, the last significant opposition to Octavian's rule was eliminated. The Roman Republic, already weakened by years of civil strife, was now effectively dead. Octavian returned to Rome in triumph, hailed as the savior of the Roman state. But the Rome he returned to was not the Republic of old. It was a new Rome, one that would soon be ruled not by senators and consuls, but by a single, all-powerful leader, an emperor. The Battle of Actium had not just been a victory on the battlefield. It was the final chapter in the long and bloody struggle for control of Rome. Octavian, through his careful planning, strategic alliances, and military prowess, had emerged victorious. But more than that, he had laid the foundation for a new era in Roman history, one that would see him crowned as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The consequences of the Battle of Actium were far-reaching. It signaled the end of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire, an empire that would last for centuries and shape the course of Western civilization. Octavian, now Augustus, would go on to rule Rome for decades, ushering in a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. The battle that had been fought on the waters off Actium would be remembered as one of the most pivotal moments in history, a moment when the future of Rome and the world was forever changed. Chapter 4. The Founding of the Roman Empire. With the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium, the long and bloody civil wars that had torn the Roman Republic apart came to an end. For the first time in decades, there was no serious contender for power, no rival armies vying for control of the state. Octavian, the young man who had once been underestimated by many, now stood as the undisputed ruler of Rome. But the task before him was daunting: how to restore stability to a republic that had been shattered by internal conflict, while consolidating his power in a way that would prevent future revolts and civil wars. The victory at Actium had left Octavian in a unique position. He could have declared himself a dictator, following in the footsteps of his adoptive father, Julius Caesar, but he was keenly aware of the dangers of such a move. Caesar's assassination had been a direct result of his attempt to concentrate too much power in his own hands. The Roman people, and particularly the Senate, still clung to the idea of the Republic and the shared governance that it had represented, even if, in practice, the system had been falling apart for years. Octavian, ever the shrewd politician, understood that he needed to balance his power carefully. While he had the loyalty of the army and the adoration of the people, he knew that if he appeared to be seizing too much control, the Senate could turn against him, just as they had against Caesar. Therefore, instead of forcing his will upon Rome, Octavian sought to restore the appearance of the Republic while quietly establishing his dominance over it. In 27 BCE, Octavian made a highly symbolic gesture that would define his political strategy. He appeared before the Senate and formally offered to relinquish all of the extraordinary powers he had accumulated during the civil wars. He presented himself as a humble servant of the Republic, ready to step down and restore the traditional system of governance. The Senate, of course, refused. They begged him to remain in power, recognizing that without his leadership, the fragile peace that had been achieved might quickly dissolve into chaos once more. In response to this request, Octavian accepted, but on his own terms. He agreed to retain control of the most important provinces, particularly those with large military presences, such as Egypt, Syria, and Hispania, while leaving the Senate nominal control over the less strategically critical provinces. This division of power gave Octavian control over the legions, the backbone of Roman authority, while allowing the Senate to maintain the illusion of its traditional role. It was at this moment that the Senate granted him the honorific title Augustus, meaning the revered one. This title, while not explicitly monarchical, elevated Octavian to a position of immense prestige and authority. He would be known from that point forward as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, though he never officially took the title of emperor. Instead, He referred to himself as princeps, or first citizen, maintaining the fiction that he was merely the leading figure in a republic rather than a monarch. This carefully crafted arrangement allowed Augustus to wield supreme power without provoking the ire of the Senate or the Roman aristocracy. He had succeeded where his predecessors had failed by understanding that in order to rule Rome, one had to respect its traditions, even as those traditions were quietly dismantled. Augustus's genius lay not just in his military victories, but in his ability to reshape Roman politics without openly breaking with the past. Once Augustus had solidified his position, he set about reforming the Roman state. His first priority was restoring order and stability after years of war. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, began under Augustus's reign, marking a period of relative tranquility that would last for more than 2 centuries. Augustus reorganized the Roman army, ensuring that it remained loyal to him by establishing a permanent standing force stationed in key provinces. The legions were no longer a tool for ambitious generals to wield against the state. They were now firmly under the control of the emperor. Augustus also undertook a series of administrative reforms designed to improve the efficiency of the Roman government. He created a professional bureaucracy, appointing capable administrators to manage the provinces and oversee taxation. These reforms brought a level of stability and order to the empire that had been lacking during the tumultuous final years of the Republic. One of Augustus's most significant achievements was his restoration of Rome itself. The city had been ravaged by years of civil strife, and its infrastructure was in disrepair. Augustus embarked on an ambitious building program, transforming Rome from a city of brick into a city of marble. He commissioned the construction of temples, forums, aqueducts, and public buildings, many of which still stand today as monuments to his reign. His efforts not only beautified the city, but also reinforced his image as a restorer of Roman glory. Among the most iconic of these projects was the Ara Pacis, or Altar of Peace, a grand monument that celebrated the peace and prosperity Augustus had brought to Rome. It was a physical manifestation of the Pax Romana, symbolizing the stability that Augustus's rule had ushered in after decades of war. The Ara Pacis depicted scenes of Roman life, religious ceremonies, and Augustus's family, reinforcing his role as both a leader of the state and a guardian of traditional Roman values. Culturally, Augustus was a patron of the arts and literature. He understood the power of propaganda and used it to shape public opinion. He surrounded himself with poets and writers who celebrated his reign and promoted the ideals of Roman greatness. Virgil, Rome's greatest poet, composed the Aeneid, an epic poem that traced the origins of Rome back to the hero Aeneas and subtly linked Augustus to this heroic lineage. The Aeneid not only glorified Rome's past, but also legitimized Augustus's rule as the fulfillment of Rome's destiny. Augustus's reforms extended beyond the city of Rome and into the provinces, where he implemented policies designed to integrate the diverse peoples of the empire. He allowed a degree of local autonomy, recognizing that Rome's vast territories were too large to govern with a one-size-fits-all approach. Provincial elites were often co-opted into Roman governance, given Roman citizenship, and encouraged to participate in the imperial system. This strategy helped maintain loyalty to the empire and reduced the likelihood of rebellion. Religion also played a key role in Augustus's efforts to consolidate his power. He positioned himself as the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the Roman state religion, and emphasized the importance of traditional Roman religious practices. Augustus recognized that religion was a powerful tool for uniting the Roman people, and he used it to reinforce his authority. Temples were built, festivals celebrated, and the worship of Roman gods intertwined with the worship of the emperor himself. By the time Augustus reached the height of his power, he had created a system of government that, while preserving the outward appearance of the Roman Republic, was in reality a monarchy in all but name. The Senate continued to exist, but its role was largely ceremonial. Real power resided with Augustus, who controlled the army, the provinces, and the wealth of the empire. His rule was absolute, but it was also stable, and this stability would become the hallmark of his reign. In Sota BCE, the Senate awarded Augustus the title Pater Patriae, or Father of the Fatherland, further cementing his position as the beloved leader of the Roman people. By this point, Augustus had successfully transitioned Rome from a fractured republic to a unified empire, and he had done so without the bloodshed or chaos that had characterized the rise of his predecessors. The founding of the Roman Empire under Augustus was not just a political transformation, it was a cultural and social revolution. Augustus's reign marked the beginning of a new era, one that would shape the course of Western civilization for centuries to come. The peace, prosperity, and grandeur of Rome during the Pax Romana were a direct result of his leadership, and his legacy would be felt long after his death. As Augustus entered the final years of his life, the empire he had built stood as a testament to his vision and skill. He had achieved what many thought impossible. He had brought an end to the civil wars, restored order to Rome, and laid the foundation for an empire that would endure for nearly 5 centuries. Augustus had not just ruled Rome, he had reshaped it, transforming it into the most powerful and enduring empire the world had ever known. Chapter 5. The Pax Romana. With the foundations of the Roman Empire firmly established under Augustus, a new era began, one that would be remembered for its relative peace, prosperity, and stability. This period, known as the Pax Romana, Roman peace, would last for more than 2 centuries, marking one of the most remarkable stretches of tranquility in the history of Western civilization. It was an era that saw Rome at its zenith, with vast territories stretching from Britannia in the north to Egypt in the south, and from Spain in the west to the Euphrates River in the east. The Pax Romana, which began with Augustus's reign in 27 BCE, was not simply the absence of war. It was a time of flourishing economic growth, cultural achievements, and political stability. Augustus, through his reforms, had brought an end to the internal strife and civil wars that had plagued Rome for decades. He had established a system of governance that ensured peace throughout the empire, and in doing so, he created an environment where art, architecture, literature, and commerce could thrive. At the heart of this peace was Augustus's ability to maintain a delicate balance of power. While he had centralized authority in his own hands, he also ensured that the Senate retained a role in governance, at least in appearance. Augustus cleverly masked his absolute control by presenting himself as the first among equals, or princeps, rather than as an outright monarch. This allowed him to maintain the loyalty of the Roman aristocracy, while simultaneously keeping the military and the provinces under his firm command. One of the key elements of the Pax Romana was the Roman military, which played a crucial role in both maintaining internal order and defending the empire's borders. Augustus had learned from the chaos of the late Republic that an unchecked military, loyal only to its generals, was a recipe for disaster. To prevent the rise of another Julius Caesar or Mark Antony, Augustus restructured the military, establishing a professional standing army that was loyal to the emperor rather than individual commanders. The legions were stationed in strategic locations across the empire, particularly along the frontiers where Rome bordered hostile or potentially hostile territories. Augustus ensured that the soldiers were well paid and regularly rotated between provinces to prevent them from becoming too loyal to any one governor or general. The army's role was twofold. It served as a deterrent to potential invaders and as a stabilizing force within the empire, preventing rebellions and uprisings. While the legions guarded the borders within the empire itself, Augustus focused on fostering prosperity and unity. Trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean and beyond were protected and expanded. The Roman road system, which connected distant provinces to the capital, was improved and extended, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and information across vast distances. These roads, built with remarkable engineering skill, would become one of the most enduring symbols of Rome's power and efficiency. The economy of the Roman Empire flourished during the Pax Romana. The peace and stability brought by Augustus allowed commerce to expand like never before. Goods from all corners of the empire, and even from beyond its borders, flowed into Rome. Spices, silk, and gems from the east, grain from Egypt, wool and tin from Britannia, and olive oil from Hispania all filled the markets of the capital. Roman merchants grew rich, and the wealth of the empire was distributed more widely than it had been during the chaotic days of the late Republic. This economic prosperity also funded Augustus's ambitious building programs, transforming Rome into a city of unparalleled grandeur. He famously boasted that he had found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Public works projects, including new roads, aqueducts, baths, temples, and monuments, not only beautified the city but also provided employment for thousands of citizens. Among the most impressive of these projects were the Forum of Augustus and the Ara Pacis, the Altar of Peace. These structures were both practical and symbolic, celebrating the peace that Augustus had brought to Rome while reinforcing his image as the protector of the state. The mausoleum of Augustus, where he would one day be buried, was another grand project that symbolized the lasting legacy he intended to leave. But the Pax Romana was not just a period of material wealth. It was also an age of cultural and intellectual flourishing. Augustus was a great patron of the arts, and under his rule, some of the most famous works of Roman literature were produced. Virgil, one of Rome's greatest poets, wrote the Aeneid during Augustus's reign, an epic poem that glorified the founding of Rome and linked Augustus's rule to the divine will of the gods. The Aeneid became a national epic, shaping Roman identity and reinforcing Augustus's position as a leader destined by fate. Other literary figures flourished as well, including Horace, whose odes and satires captured the spirit of the age, and Ovid, whose Metamorphoses is still one of the most enduring works of classical literature. These writers, supported by Augustus's patronage, contributed to the creation of a Roman cultural identity that would resonate for centuries. In addition to literature, architecture and engineering reached new heights during the Pax Romana. Roman architects and engineers designed aqueducts that brought fresh water to cities, bridges that spanned wide rivers, and amphitheaters like the Colosseum, where Romans could enjoy public spectacles and games. The emphasis on public infrastructure not only improved the quality of life for Roman citizens, but also showcased the empire's wealth and engineering prowess. The Pax Romana also saw the expansion of Roman law. Augustus recognized that for the empire to remain united, there needed to be a common legal framework that applied to all citizens, regardless of where they lived within the empire. Roman law was codified and refined, becoming one of Rome's most enduring legacies. The legal principles established during the Pax Romana would later form the basis of many modern legal systems, particularly in the Western world. Augustus's policies also promoted integration and cohesion within the diverse empire. The Roman world was vast, encompassing a multitude of cultures, languages, and religions. Rather than imposing strict uniformity, Augustus allowed a degree of local autonomy. Cities and provinces were often permitted to govern themselves according to their own customs, provided they remained loyal to Rome and paid their taxes. This policy of relative tolerance helped maintain peace and stability in the provinces, as local elites were co-opted into the Roman system rather than oppressed by it. Religion played an important role in Augustus's strategy for unity. He positioned himself as the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, and emphasized the importance of traditional Roman religious practices. Temples were built to honor the Roman gods, and religious festivals were celebrated with renewed vigor. Augustus was also deified after his death, becoming a god in the Roman state religion. This blending of religion and politics reinforced Augustus's image as not just a political leader, but a divinely sanctioned ruler. As Augustus grew older, the question of succession loomed large. The Roman Republic had fallen, but the empire needed a system of continuity if the peace and prosperity of the Pax Romana were to last. Augustus had no son of his own, and he had to carefully select and groom a successor who would continue his legacy. After a series of personal tragedies and political miscalculations, Augustus eventually settled on his stepson, Tiberius, as his heir. In 14 CE, after more than 40 years of rule, Augustus died. His death marked the end of an era, but the empire he had created would endure for centuries. The Pax Romana continued under his successors, though none would achieve the same level of stability or greatness as Augustus himself. His reign had set the standard for what it meant to be a Roman emperor, and his legacy would be felt long after his death. Augustus's reign brought an unprecedented period of peace, stability, and cultural achievement to Rome. The Pax Romana was not just a temporary respite from conflict, it was a profound transformation of the Roman world. The empire had grown stronger, wealthier, and more unified than ever before. Augustus had succeeded in turning Rome from a republic mired in chaos into a mighty empire that would dominate the ancient world for centuries to come. Chapter 6. Augustus's Legacy. On the 19th of August, 14 CE, after a reign spanning more than 4 decades, Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, passed away peacefully at the age of 75. His death marked the end of an era, but the legacy he left behind would resonate for centuries. Augustus was not simply a ruler, he was an architect of an empire that would shape the course of Western history. Under his guidance, Rome transitioned from a republic teetering on the edge of collapse to a stable and prosperous empire, a transformation so profound that the structure he created would endure long after his death. Augustus had come to power at a time of great upheaval, inheriting a republic torn apart by civil wars, corruption, and political infighting. The Roman Republic, which had once been the pride of the Mediterranean world, had been brought to the brink of ruin by internal conflicts. Julius Caesar's assassination had triggered a power vacuum that led to further chaos, and the dream of a unified, peaceful Rome seemed distant. But Augustus, through a combination of shrewd political maneuvering, military brilliance, and administrative reforms, brought about an unprecedented era of peace known as the Pax Romana. The Pax Romana was perhaps Augustus's greatest legacy. It was an era of relative peace that lasted for over 2 centuries, allowing Rome to prosper as never before. Under Augustus's rule, the Roman Empire expanded its borders, solidified its control over the provinces, and established a system of governance that maintained stability across a vast and diverse territory. This peace was not without occasional military campaigns or conflicts, but compared to the civil strife that had preceded Augustus, it was a period of remarkable calm. The Pax Romana allowed for the flourishing of commerce, the spread of Roman culture, and the integration of different peoples under Roman law. Augustus had always been a master of public image, and in death his image only grew stronger. His deification by the Senate, being declared Divus Augustus, cemented his place not only in Roman history but also in Roman religion. Augustus was now a god, worshipped in temples alongside the traditional Roman deities. This deification was more than just a religious gesture. It was a political statement, reaffirming the divine legitimacy of his rule and the dynasty he had founded. Augustus's family would continue to rule Rome, with his stepson, Tiberius, succeeding him as emperor. The transition of power to Tiberius was relatively smooth, a testament to the political system Augustus had put in place. Unlike Julius Caesar, whose sudden rise to power had destabilized Rome, Augustus had carefully groomed his successors and created a political structure that could endure beyond his lifetime. He understood that Rome needed stability, not just during his reign, but in the years to come, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that the empire would survive the transition from one emperor to the next. One of Augustus's most significant achievements was the reorganization of the Roman government. While he maintained the appearance of republican institutions, in practice, Rome had become an autocracy. Augustus had cleverly retained the Senate as a functioning body, allowing senators to believe they still held some degree of power. But in reality, all major decisions were made by the emperor. By carefully balancing the desires of the Senate with his own absolute authority, Augustus ensured that Rome would not slide back into civil war or political chaos. His administrative reforms, including the professionalization of the military and the establishment of a permanent bureaucracy, created a stable foundation for the empire. The Roman legal system, which evolved during the Pax Romana, was another cornerstone of Augustus's legacy. Roman law became more standardized across the empire, ensuring that citizens and subjects alike could rely on a common legal framework. This legal system would become one of the most enduring aspects of Roman civilization, influencing the development of law in Europe and beyond for millennia to come. Concepts such as innocent until proven guilty, the right to a fair trial, and the equality of all citizens before the law were rooted in the legal reforms that took shape during Augustus's reign. Culturally, Augustus left an indelible mark on Rome. His patronage of the arts helped usher in a golden age of Roman literature. Writers such as Virgil, Horace, Ovid, and Livy flourished under Augustus's rule, producing works that would become classics of Western literature. Virgil's Aeneid, in particular, was not just a celebration of Rome's mythological origins, but also a glorification of Augustus's reign. Through his support of these writers, Augustus was able to shape the narrative of Roman history, presenting himself as the rightful heir to Rome's heroic past and the guardian of its future. Augustus' impact on Roman architecture was equally profound. He had famously boasted that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Under his direction, the city of Rome was transformed into a magnificent capital, filled with grand temples, forums, and public buildings. The Forum of Augustus, the Ara Pacis, and the Mausoleum of Augustus were just a few of the monumental structures that symbolized Rome's greatness and Augustus's role as its builder. These public works not only beautified the city, but also reinforced the image of Augustus as the restorer of Rome's glory. But perhaps Augustus's most enduring legacy was his creation of the Roman Empire itself. He had not just conquered territories, he had woven them into a cohesive and lasting empire. Under Augustus, the borders of the empire expanded to their furthest reaches, encompassing vast lands from Britannia in the north to Egypt in the south, and from Hispania in the west to Syria in the east. The provinces were integrated into the Roman system, with local elites given a stake in the success of the empire. Roman culture, law, and governance spread throughout these regions, creating a common identity that transcended local differences. Augustus's ability to manage this vast empire was a testament to his administrative genius. He understood that the key to maintaining control over such a large and diverse territory was not through force alone, but through inclusion and cooperation. By co-opting local elites into the Roman system, he ensured that the provinces remained loyal and stable. This system of governance would endure for centuries, allowing the Roman Empire to survive long after Augustus's death. Yet, for all his achievements, Augustus was not without flaws. His personal life, particularly the question of succession, was fraught with tragedy. His daughter, Julia, was exiled for her scandalous behavior, and his grandsons, Gaius and Lucius, whom he had groomed to succeed him, both died young. These personal losses weighed heavily on Augustus, and his eventual choice of Tiberius as his successor was a compromise rather than his first choice. Tiberius, though capable, lacked Augustus's charisma and vision, and his reign would be marked by a retreat from public life and a reliance on autocratic rule. Nevertheless, Augustus had set the stage for the continuation of the Roman Empire. He had brought an end to the civil wars, established a system of governance that could endure, and left Rome more powerful, more prosperous, and more unified than it had ever been. His reign marked the beginning of a new era in Roman history, one that would see the empire continue to dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. In the end, Augustus's legacy was not just the creation of an empire, but the creation of a lasting vision for Rome. He had transformed the city of Rome into the capital of a vast and powerful empire, and in doing so, he had transformed the world. Augustus had played his part well, and in the annals of history, his name would forever be associated with the greatness of Rome,